You have spent your entire life with a stranger. That stranger is you. You defend it. You justify it. You endure the consequences of it. Yet, you seldom challenge it. Questioning your identity can feel like a form of psychological death. From the moment you became aware, you were handed a mirror, not made of glass, but of reactions: approval, disapproval, praise, correction. Before you could truly understand yourself, the world started shaping who it thought you should be. Smile more, speak less, stay strong, be polite, impress, attract, achieve, be anything, everything, just never undefined. Without realizing it, you began shaping a version of yourself designed to survive scrutiny, a version guided by safety rather than truth, a personality crafted for acceptance, a character built to reduce conflict. Carl Jung gave this creation a name: the persona. It is not your true self, nor your deepest nature, but your social costume, the identity you present to keep the world comfortable. It is the voice you adopt when you are not at ease, the smile you wear without feeling joy, the confidence you show while doubt quietly grows within. The persona acts as the diplomat of your mind, the negotiator, the adapter, the mask. And like all effective masks, it succeeds. It shields you from rejection, helps you fit in, and creates the appearance of stability. Yet, every mask comes with a hidden cost. The more convincing your persona becomes, the more you forget what lies beneath it. The brain favors consistency over authenticity. When a role is repeated long enough, it stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like identity. I am this kind of person. I am confident. I am shy. I am logical. I am emotional. These statements are spoken with certainty, yet they are shaped by adaptation, not self-discovery. You didn't wake up one day and deliberately craft your personality. It formed under pressure, under observation, and under the quiet weight of social expectations. Every environment influenced you: family dynamics, school hierarchies, friendship politics, cultural norms, all unspoken rules you absorb without being explicitly taught. Act a certain way, and you are rewarded. Act differently, and tension arises. Your nervous system is naturally designed to avoid that tension. You adapt it continuously, subtly, persistently, until the adjusted self became nearly indistinguishable from your true self. Yet adaptation is not identity. Survival is not selfhood. Functionality is not truth. Most people live their lives without ever noticing the difference. The persona is persuasive. It offers structure, predictability, and a story you can share with others. Without it, a difficult question emerges. Who are you without your roles, without your labels, without your practice responses? This isn't a philosophical question. It is destabilizing. When the persona falters, certainty crumbles, and the mind resists that collapse more fiercely than almost anything else. Oh, you hold on to labels, descriptions, professions, traits, beliefs, not because they're entirely accurate, but because they feel stable. The ego thrives on definition. It needs boundaries. I am this, not that. Yet Jung noticed something unsettling. Much of what you consider your identity is not self-created. It is socially negotiated. You become what is tolerated, suppress what is inconvenient, and amplify what is rewarded. Gradually and almost imperceptibly, your personality becomes a compromise rather than a discovery. Here lies the first psychological shock. If your identity is shaped by adaptation, how much of it is truly yours? How many preferences are inherited? How many fears are conditioned? How many ambitions were implanted? How many behaviors exist solely to maintain approval? The persona is not morally deceptive. It is a survival mechanism. Yet survival mechanisms can turn into prisons, because the mask does more than shield you from others. It shields you from yourself. You start believing your own performance. You mistake repetition for essence and familiarity for truth. But deep within your psyche, something remains untouched, unedited, uncivilized, and unadapted. Jung called this part of the psyche the shadow. It contains everything that doesn't fit within your accepted identity, every impulse that threatened belonging, every trait that risked disapproval. These aspects are destroyed or erased. They are buried. And what is buried doesn't disappear. It lingers, influencing you quietly. This leads to one of the most unsettling realizations. The self you experience may be only a surface phenomenon, a constructed interface, a central narrative, not the full extent of who you truly are. This raises a challenging question. If you are not identical to your persona, then who is the you defend? What if your identity is less a fixed object and more a temporary arrangement? Fragments are mistaken for unity. Adaptations are mistaken for essence. Masks are mistaken for truth. There is a part of you have never truly encountered, not because it is hidden, but because you actively avoid it. This is not mystery. It is design. The human mind is not only built to reveal truth, it is built to preserve stability. And nothing threatens psychological stability more than realizing you are not who you think you are. Deep beneath your conscious identity, beneath your practiced personality, beneath your carefully maintained self-image, exists something older, less civilized, and inconvenient. Jung called it the shadow, not a monster or a dark fantasy, but the rejected parts of your own psyche, everything that didn't fit into the identity you learned to present. Every impulse deemed unacceptable, every trait labeled undesirable, every emotion that risked disapproval. These aspects are not eliminated or erased. They are pushed out of awareness. The psyche follows a strict rule. What cannot be accepted must be hidden, not from others, but from yourself. The shadow forms quietly during childhood, in moments of correction, in subtle shaming, in times when your natural response is met with discomfort. Too loud, too emotional, too sensitive, too aggressive, too different, always judged as too much. The psyche makes a choice long before you're aware of it. This part of me is dangerous. This trait must remain unseen. This impulse must be buried. But buried does not mean destroyed. Buried means active, just without permission. The shadow does not vanish. It reorganizes. It waits in the unconscious, shaping your perceptions, reactions, and desires without ever announcing itself. This creates a peculiar psychological paradox. You believe you are acting freely, yet unseen forces influence your behavior from behind the scenes. Consider sudden anger, irrational jealousy, disproportionate irritation, unexplained attractions, silent resentments, or recurring self-sabotage. These experiences feel like you, but often they are eruptions from disowned parts of your psyche. The shadow does not act politely. It leaks, slips, hijacks, and emerges whenever control falters. Under stress, fatigue, or intense emotion, the shadow emerges, and when it does, you rarely recognize it, because the ego resists anything that challenges its preferred self-image. I am not an angry person. I am not insecure. I am not jealous. I am not capable of that. Yet the shadow thrives in this very denial. What you refuse to acknowledge does not lose power. It becomes invisible, and invisibility is power. Jung made a striking observation. The traits you judge most harshly in others often belong to your own shadow. The arrogance that angers you, the weakness you despise, the selfishness you judge, the dishonesty you notice instantly. Why do these provoke such strong reactions? Because the psyche recognizes what the ego refuses to accept. This is where projection begins. You see in others what you cannot tolerate within yourself, often without conscious awareness. The shadow is not just hidden darkness. It is everything that conflicts with the story you tell about yourself. The stronger your self-image, the denser your shadow becomes. Perfection demands repression. Moral superiority demands suppression. A rigid identity demands exclusion. I would never do that, generates unconscious tension. Every forced self-description leaves behind psychological residue, and that residue builds silently, patiently, and powerfully. Yet the shadow is not solely negative. It also holds suppressed creativity, unexpressed confidence, forbidden ambition, disowned strength, ignored instincts, parts of you that were never evil, only inconvenient, traits that didn't meet expectations, potentials that risked rejection, all buried alongside your fears. This means the shadow is not just your darkness. It is your unlived life, your unexpressed self, your unused psychological energy. Here lies the second shock. You are not only unaware of your flaws, but also of your hidden power. The shadow cannot stay buried indefinitely, because psychic energy demands expression. What is denied within returns outwardly, as compulsions, destructive patterns, emotional volatility, and recurring life problems you cannot fully explain. The unconscious always collects its debt. Ignore your shadow, and it governs you indirectly. Recognize your shadow, and you begin reclaiming authorship. But recognition is psychologically violent because it requires dismantling illusions, admitting contradictions, facing impulses that disturb your identity. This is why most people never do it. Not because it is complex, because it is destabilizing. The ego fears dissolution more than ignorance. It prefers a comfortable fiction over a disruptive truth. Yet Jung insisted on a brutal principle: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Which brings us to a question few dare to ask honestly. How much of your personality is built on rejection? How much of yourself exists only because other parts were exiled? How many of the conflicts in your life are actually conflicts within your own psyche? And the most unsettling thought, what if the person you struggle with most intensely isn't outside you, but inside you? If that idea unsettles you, that's a sign you're beginning to confront what most people spend their lives avoiding. Self-knowledge is not comforting. It is destabilizing. Yet Jung saw this as one of the mind's most compelling illusions. Your inner world does not act as a single entity. It functions as a system of competing forces, conflicting desires, contradictory impulses, opposing fears, and shifting motivations that emerge and disappear without warning. One part of you seeks comfort, while another pushes for growth. One part wants safety, while another craves risk. One part clings to attachment, while another longs to break free. Which of these is the real you? The question is unsettling because each part feels authentic when active. Every state convinces you, this is me in the moment, yet they cannot all represent a single, fixed identity. Your psyche is not one voice. It is a dialogue, sometimes a negotiation, sometimes a conflict. Sometimes it is a silent war. You experience this internal fragmentation constantly, yet rarely interpret accurately. You might say, I changed my mind. But what actually happened could be a shift in psychological dominance, one internal force replacing another, one perspective temporarily overpowering its opposite. Jung's model of the psyche is not based on unity, but on multiplicity. The ego, your conscious sense of I, is not the total self. It is a focal point of awareness, a coordinating function striving to create coherence from internal complexity. It is a storyteller, not the entire story. Beneath the ego operate autonomous structures, emotional patterns, instinctual drives, internalized voices, forgotten memories, and archetypal energies that shape perception without ever reaching conscious awareness. They influence decisions before you rationalize them, trigger reactions before you can explain them, and color reality before you notice the distortion. The ego, craving stability, constructs a comforting narrative. I decided this. I believe this. This is who I am. But this sense of authorship can be misleading because awareness often arrives after impulse, after emotion, and after unconscious processes have already guided your behavior in a particular direction. This produces a peculiar sense of inner contradiction. You promise change, yet repeat the same patterns. You desire progress, yet resist taking action. You pursue goals, yet undermine your own momentum, not because of a lack of discipline, but because different parts of your psyche pursue different outcomes. The mind is not always aligned with itself, and the illusion of a single, unified self becomes even more evident when you notice how dramatically your identity shifts across contexts. Who you are with friends, who you are with family, who you are in conflict, who you are alone, who you are under pressure, who you are when admired, who you are when ignored. Which of these is the authentic self? Or are they all situational expressions of deeper psychological dynamics? Jung proposed that what we call the self is not a fixed object, but a process, an evolving relationship between conscious awareness and the vast unconscious structures beneath it. The self is a moving equilibrium, not a permanent core. This insight shakes the very foundation of identity. If you are not a singular entity but a dynamic system, the question, who am I, has no simple answer. There is no single face behind a mask, no permanent psychological form. Only patterns of organization, temporary dominances, and shifting configurations of thought, emotion, memory, instinct, and perception. Yet this is not pathology. It is structure. The psyche was never meant to be a rigid monolith. It is a living system, capable of adaptation, contradiction, tension, and transformation. Suffering often arises not from this multiplicity itself, but from being unconscious of it, from rigidly identifying with one fragment while rejecting others, from demanding internal consistency where psychological diversity naturally exists. The ego seeks certainty. The psyche holds complexity. And the friction between the two produces confusion, anxiety, self-doubt, and inner conflict. But Jung's work does not leave us in disorientation. It guides us toward integration, not by erasing multiplicity, but by becoming aware of it, not by eliminating inner contradictions, but by recognizing them without illusion, not by asking which part is me, but by understanding that identity is a dynamic orchestration, not a singular entity. The goal is not a simplified self, but conscious relationship with the forces that shape your inner world, to observe without immediate identification, to notice without reflexive defense, and to recognize that thoughts, emotions, and impulses arise within you, yet are not always identical to the observing awareness itself. And here lies the deepest shift Jung invites. You are not merely the contents of your mind. You are the field in which those contents arise. Not every impulse defines you. Not every emotion explains you. Not every thought represents you. The psyche is an ecosystem, not a single voice. Self-knowledge begins the moment you stop confusing temporary inner events with absolute identity. The moment you recognize that the self you defend so fiercely may be a provisional construction within a much deeper psychological reality. This brings a final, striking clarity. You are not a fixed being discovering life. You are a psychological process unfolding through it. What you become depends less on who you think you are and more on what you're willing to allow yourself to experience.